Hello there, brothers and sisters and pipe smokers of Ireland. This is part 2 in a rant about those philosophies in our world that are taking away our humanity and our freedom to believe. Before I get started on my rant, this is part 2. You need to listen to part 1. I am smoking some black gold today in a pipe made for me by a dear friend who lives in Canada. His name is Gordon Robinson, and this man is a precious soul. And he made this pipe. If you can see the rustication on it, looks like the wings of a pelican, basically, or a seagull. And quite the artist, and not a bad pipe maker, whatever. This is one of my favorite pipes to smoke when I'm working. And the fact that Gordon took the time to make something while thinking of me is very touching to me. Shout out to Gordon Robinson, one of our members, whose family is going through a very heavy and hot, fiery trial, and yet they keep their faith, and and he has remained just a sweet and tender soul. There's not an ounce of bitterness in him. And Gordon, I know you pray for me. I pray for you too. Thank you so much. Love the pipe. So, I'm going to talk a little bit more about worldview, philosophy, and a culture war going on in this country, which I think is even worse in Europe. It is taking the world by storm. It's not new, but it is a layer upon layer growing pandemic. Don't think we can win it. I think in the end, people who believe in the Bible, whether Jews or Christians, are going to be at the bottom of the food chain. And as more and more people think these kinds of thoughts, these kinds of philosophies, believe in these kind of redefinition of words, they're going to grow in their intolerance and in their hatred for people whose morals and ethics and worldview are pretty much derived from what we call the Word of the Living God, or the Bible. I don't know if I'm qualified or not. I have a doctorate in theology called a THD. I have a doctorate in philosophy, and I have a doctorate in Christian leadership and history. All that means is, like PhD, all PhD stands for is really piled high and deep. I've got all those doctorates in order to come to the educated conclusion I don't know a dang thing about nothing. But I'm old at 60, and so you get opinionated. And although I don't believe half the things I thought were for sure when I was younger, the things I know for sure now may be few, but I know them for sure because they've standed the test of time and suffering. But in America, I can only speak for America. I know a little bit about what's going on in Europe. Well, let me just speak for my own country. And my state, which is one of the more decadent states in America, probably responsible for poisoning the world, about on the same level as New York. And say to you that our culture in America is at war. Commonly, that war is called culture wars. And it's a war for the minds and the souls and the very lives, if you will, of every American that has over the years grown up in this culture that we call the secular culture of America, and has seen that it has grown in its intensity. It's really very simply a battle between faith and unbelief. Bottom line, it's a battle of faith in God, in the Bible, and basically people that do find themselves in a war with people that don't. A great German author once said that the only struggle in this world worth engaging in is the one between faith and unbelief. Mortimer Adler, who edited the great books of Western world, once wrote something like this: more consequences for life have stemmed from belief or disbelief. Let me say that again. More consequences for life, not in life, but for life, has stemmed from belief or disbelief in God than from any other factor. If I butchered that quote, forgive me, but that's pretty much what he said. This is pervasive. It's an all-inclusive war that I, as a pastor, find myself particularly engaged in. And we're told by experts in the strategies of war that there are a number of different phases to the art of warfare. The first phase is called the semantic phase, which simply means that the horrors of war is a consequence of ideas that first begin with words. And I talked last week a little bit about the fact that words have consequences. Ideas have consequences. Ideologies can be very dangerous, to the tune of 100 million people that died under Stalin and Lenin. I think Stalin had 43 million and 11 million in Nazi Germany. Lenin was responsible for 6 million. Millions and millions of people have been wiped out. The humanity of a culture of human beings sucked out and rationalized and justified, mainly because of an acceptance of words being spoken by unworthy authorities. And I've said this before in our man camp. The goal of every man is to determine who's going to be his authority. There is no such thing as an autonomous man. They may think they're autonomous, but most of our behaviors, if not all of our behaviors and opinions, come by way of us accepting someone's philosophy. Even the cynic has adapted the philosophy of a particular man in history who developed the cynicism approach. Unbelief is the derivative of somebody's ideology. And like the old adage says, there is no atheist in a foxhole. Guy went to a psychologist and said, "You got to help me. I believe I'm dead." The psychologist said, "Well, how can you believe you're dead?" "I believe it. I'm dead." The psychologist said, took a knife and quickly cut him in his forearm, and he started bleeding. But we discussed this before. You believe that dead people don't bleed, and there you're bleeding. So what does that tell you? The man said, "I'll be damned if dead people don't bleed after all." There's a saying that says, "A man who believes against his will is an unbeliever still." Faith in anything starts with a surrender of your will. And if the authority behind the ideology you believe is unworthy, you're sunk. Well, we all have to come to the place of finding who our authority is going to be. And woe to you if your authority is man, because that makes you a social Darwinist, which means basically that whoever is the strongest at the time is the person that's going to be your authority. And at one time it was Stalin, to the tune of 43 million to 60 million people. Lenin, 6 million. Adolf Hitler, 11 million. So you're going to trust in somebody, and you're going to serve somebody. For some people, they'd rather rule in hell than serve in heaven, and that's your prerogative. But you're going to serve somebody. You're going to believe somebody. And if it ain't God, then you're putting your trust in a man. And Machiavelli called that right out. If you've never read The Prince by Machiavelli, it's pretty short. You should read it. Because much of what is going on in the world today is very Machiavellian. The entire 20th century, if you will, has been unfolding in development of this war of words, and in this war on words, Christianity is losing. We've been out-generaled, we've been out-strategized, we've been out-maneuvered almost every side, but things seem to be changing as a new patriotism is growing in the country, and it's emerging and fighting not as an entity fighting just merely the gross national product of this country or its national boundaries, but its conflict as one contending for the moral foundations of America, its very soul, if you will, and it must be fought in this stage of war of words and ideas. Because the first phase of any warfare is semantics, and we have been in the war of words now for about 65 years. When I was growing up, one of the things that you needed to read, especially in college, was George Orwell's book, 1984. And in that book, he spoke about the department of truth in which workers labor 24/7 in transforming truth into lies. That is, a redefinition of previously understood words to mean something different. We've got such a department, I think, at work in this country. And it's found in our U.S. Supreme Court's misinterpretation of the Constitution, the public education's textbooks like Common Core, and its revisionist history that seeks to exorcise God and Christ and Christianity from all its texts and secularize our faith. And it's found on the college campuses of any universities who followed the example of Judas Iscariot and betrayed their Christian founding fathers, because basically every college campus in America was founded by a pastor of some kind. And many of these college campuses had as their motto something about the spreading of gospel or the upholding of biblical faith. Now they become a den for liberal thinking, more akin to the ACLU than that which strengthens the faith and the morality of this country. And I like to use three of the most crucial and critical words in the war on words that have been taken and perverted and twisted so that they have come to mean something other than what they really mean and were intended to mean, and are now rather used to deceive the general public. I want to just lay a foundation by talking about these words and showing you how the propaganda machine wins culture wars by, first of all, having a war on words. I think I probably only have time today for one. Let's talk about the word relative or relativity. One of the authors I enjoy reading is Alan Bloom, and he had a book out a couple years ago I read called The Closing of the American Mind, in which he wrote the following: "There is one thing a professor can be absolutely certain of, that almost every student entering the university believes that truth is relative." And then Dr. Bloom goes on and says that this is the one thing the public school system has managed to teach our children from a very young age. Most of these college students that I'm talking about will look at you incredulously, as if How can it be otherwise than this? That there is no absolute truth, especially in the realm of ethics. Your truth is your truth for you. My truth is my truth for me. Is that really true? If my truth is truth for me, and I want your wife, what's to keep me from reaching across this desk and wringing your neck? Because if I believe in Darwinianism and that only the strong survive, you're part of the herd and I'm Superman as far as Nietzsche's concerned. Why can't I just kill you if that's moral for me, if that's ethical for me? You say, well, because it's against the law. Whose law then? If you don't recognize any higher authority than man, I'm the strongest in this room right now, and therefore I'm an authority over you because I'm saying I'm going to wring your neck and take your wife and you can't do anything about it, and you don't have any right to tell me that's wrong. Because I'm a man, you're a man, the lawmakers are men. Who are they to tell me what to do? Who are to say they're right or wrong? Where does their morality and ethics derive if it's not from God? And if it's not from God, I'm editing that law right now because I want something you got. Yet most college students will not even be able to answer the question of when or where they learned this kind of interpretation for relativity. And when Dr. Albert Einstein discovered that the theory of relativity was being used, it had broken out of its boundaries, and its boundaries were in science and physics, and that it was being applied to the realm of morals and ethics and basically everything else, he was appalled. And he said relativity is for physics, not ethics. Now, although Einstein was not a moral relativist by any stretch of the imagination, and he did not believe that everything is relevant, we're using that theory that he developed to develop our ethics, or de-evolve our ethics. The Department of Truth has taken relativity outside its scope of functionality, and it's produced the postmodern philosophy of moral relativity, which basically is deconstructionism. And so I fear for my country. A country that was founded on a biblical worldview. It was founded on a Christian ethics. No, you can argue that till you're blue in the face, but other than 3 of the signers of the American Declaration of Independence Constitution, those 3 were closet Christians, or at least practical atheists, meaning they had a Christian worldview even if they didn't live that way. All the rest of them taught the Bible. They were godly men as far as that realm of history was concerned. And they placed biblical worldview into the Declaration of Independence. Our covenant, and almost every covenant in any state that founded the governments of those states, were based off of covenants in Scripture. Am I saying everybody in America should be forced to be a Christian? No. Am I saying everybody should be assumed to think Christianly? No. But I think, at least ethically concerned, since our laws are based on the Judeo-Christian ethic, everybody should be in agreement that the authority upon which our laws and governments are founded should be and should return to be what they were when this country was founded. A biblical worldview, at least as far as ethics is concerned, as far as the governing of men is concerned, as far as work is concerned. I have a friend right now who has a cancer that's spreading over his body. My dear friend. Just saw him yesterday. And he has to let it run its course. Because in his profession, if he gets surgery, he's going to be out for a while. He can't pay for it because he has no insurance. And he has to work. He's working, and part of his paycheck is paying for other people's insurance who do not work, while he himself cannot afford to pay for the insurance, which he is disqualified from getting like those people are getting it because he is a working man. And that incenses me. This is a war of ideas. Years ago, the Communist Party developed a strategy for capturing America, at least in the realm of its ideas, by first engaging in a war of words, of semantics. And I think they may have won. In these war of words, based on the theory of relativity, where there are no absolutes, you can count on at least one absolute, and that absolute is that it cannot tolerate people like me. And in the end, if it is going to, quote, evolve or go to the next level, it's going to have to do something about us. It's going to have to either shut us up or develop a Third Reich mentality and decide that we are enemies of the state and that we need to be killed. Which, guess what, does happening 3/4 of the world under Sharia law. So friends, you need to examine your thoughts and examine how much of what you say you believe is based on bias, hurt feelings, propaganda, stereotyping. Some of my favorite defenders of the Christian faith became that way while trying to write a book to denounce the Christian faith. One was a man by the name of Frank Morrison, a Hollywood director. One was a lawyer, Josh McDowell. One was a news reporter by the name of Lee Strobel. And all these guys were atheists trying to disprove Christianity and take it down. And when trying to look at the evidence as a way of doing it, the evidence was too heavy in favor of our faith. Basically, our faith hinges on one thing. Did Jesus or did not Jesus rise from the dead? If that can be disproven, the Christian faith is a belief system that belongs to lunatics and fools. The Bible itself says that in 1 Corinthians 15. Irregardless, I don't want this to turn out to be some kind of a televangelist attempt to get you guys to be Christians and Bible thumpers and all that. That's not my job, and it'd be a violation of this residence post. But I am a pastor, and I am a theologian, and I leak. And I'm going to leak heavily in this series, basically because I don't believe there is a man on this planet who's morally perfect enough to tell me what to do. And that if he is going to tell me what to do, then the laws upon which he bases his authority have got to come from something higher than him. If it doesn't, we are going to all be about as good and about as human as what the next human being in power tells us we can or cannot be. This is the Pipepastor. And until next time, God bless your souls. Be good to yourselves and the people around you. Find your humanity in this time when there's strife, division, and violence and hatred that's ever growing in America. We'll talk about where that comes from because that is also based on an ideology. But until the next time I talk to you, in all your trials and all of your sufferings and all of your joys and all your triumphs, may the good Lord be with you. Sláinte.